Hey there. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Sonia Space. This is episode 35. And I just want to say that for those of you that have been part of my listening audience over the last 2 years, or if you're new to the space, I am so thankful and grateful to have you on board. This is my second video recording. I've been doing audio recording for a while, and this year was a year that I really wanted to get into video recording. Not only that, I also wanted to have guest speakers on my podcast series. I am so excited to be able to have these guest speakers in my space on my podcast series because we're going to have entrepreneurs, authors, other podcasters. I mean, it's a great way to learn from others, have these insightful conversations. I'm so excited to have them on board. Also, if you are interested in being on my podcast and if you feel like you can bring in some insightful conversations to my space, if you go on my Instagram, soniasspacepodcast, and under my links, you can fill out the intake request form. And if I feel like that you can align with my content, and if you feel like you can bring some value to my listeners, I would be super excited to have you on board. For today's episode, I want to ask you, have you ever thought that you are just not good at something, or I'm not this type of person? And have you ever thought that maybe it's you having a fixed mindset? And the reason why I want to talk about this topic of mindset, a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, is because this is something that I've personally been dealing with over the last few years, especially having my own podcast. I started doing audio recordings, but I set goals for myself to start doing video recordings and having guest speakers on board. I mean, a lot of it required me to be consistent and show up for myself. And yes, there were times where there were setbacks. I mean, I just had a baby, right? And there were some setbacks. Obviously, there were certain things that I was doing which wasn't really working out for me throughout my podcast journey, and I had to figure things out. Again, it's still a continuous learning process for me to understand the podcasting space, right? I mean, you have all these software programs, the recording aspect of it. There's so much that goes into podcasting, but the way you move forward and progress in this space is you need to make sure you have a growth mindset. And so for today's episode, I want to talk about what is a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is a mindset where you believe that certain abilities, the level of intelligence that you have, and certain talents that you have, you're like born with it and you either have it or you don't. And that's not necessarily true because someone with a growth mindset doesn't think that way. They believe that if you have certain talents or abilities, whatever it may be, it is developed through consistent effort, feedback, and learning. Struggling with self-confidence and low confidence, I realize confidence isn't necessarily something that you're born with. It is something that you learn over time, and it requires you to do certain things to where you build that level of confidence for yourself. So a lot of times when you show up into a space and you're working on something, it does require you to put in the effort, put in the work, be open to constructive criticism to be able to excel in that area or space. For example, right? So a fixed mindset would be, I'm not good at XYZ, but a growth mindset would say, I can improve this with practice, right? I just need to practice this. I just need to work on this. A fixed mindset would think failure means I'm not good enough, but a growth mindset would think mistakes can help me learn and it would help me learn how to be better at something. Another example would be, if I don't try, I won't fail, right? You're like avoiding rejection, you're avoiding failure. Whereas a growth mindset would think, okay, this is a challenge. I'm going to overcome this challenge and it will help me grow. So I want to give you an example of mine where I shifted from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. Growing up, I feel like I've struggled with low confidence, struggled with confidence and speaking up for myself. And I've always had this fear of public speaking. You guys know that I am a podcast host, right? And I would think that I get nervous, I'll never be good at this. But when I shifted into this space and shifted into this mindset of, everyone gets nervous. Most people get nervous when they go into public speaking, but the more you do it, the better that you get at it. That is absolutely so true because in my corporate job, I've been in so many meetings, I've done so many presentations, I've talked to so many people. And once you get into the habit of doing more of that and speaking up more, it just gets easier to deal with. Now, don't get me wrong, I still get nervous. There are times where I get a little nervous, and it's kind of silly. It's a silly way to think about this, and I know people can relate to this where you're just like, "Oh, this person's judging me," or they're like staring down at me, but in reality, no one's really thinking about you that much. So I've always had this fear of public speaking. I'm still working on it. I mean, I started my own podcast series where I'm literally exposing myself and talking on it all the time. I mean, the whole world can hear me, right? But a lot of it has to do with my mindset and the way I think about this and go about this, right? Like I got into this mindset, this growth mindset of if I keep doing more of this, I will get better at it. And it's okay to be nervous. It's okay to take on challenges, but eventually you will overcome that challenge. You will learn to embrace it and just get better at doing these things. So, how do you get into the state of having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset? So, there's a few things that you have to do for yourself to be able to think and perceive in this manner. The first thing I would say is be able to self reflect and hold yourself accountable. This comes with a lot of self awareness. Be able to tell yourself, okay, I messed up and it's okay. Or why did I mess up? Was it something that I did that made me set up for failure? Right. So you have to make sure that you are doing some self reflection and you're holding yourself accountable and work towards bettering yourself. The other thing that you need to do and be mindful of is be able to take constructive criticism and feedback. I mean, the only way that you're going to improve is maybe see things from another perspective. If something didn't work out for you, let's say like you start your own business, right? And a part of that business led you to fail at something, or a client told you to not do things a certain way and you get some feedback. You cannot take that to the heart and you cannot take that literally. You just have to understand that this did not work for you at this time, but how can you do things differently? Because again, no one's perfect. Sometimes we get into this phase of having like a tunnel vision and having a certain perspective on things, but a lot of times you have to keep an open mind and understand that there are different ways to looking at things. So be open to constructive criticism and feedback. You have to take failure as feedback and as an opportunity to improve in a certain area or space. Other thing you can do is understand that effort and consistency will get you the results that you want. And I mentioned this earlier, like having a fixed mindset, you would think that, oh, just because someone's born with this or they're born with this talent, that's the only way that, they're the only ones that can succeed in doing this. People end up being successful because they have the grit, they are consistent, and they show up for themselves. And not only that, they're able to celebrate their efforts as well. If you're not willing to put yourself out there, if you're not willing to be cringy or, really expose yourself and be okay with embarrassing yourself, like, how are you going to move forward? You really have to put in the work. You have to be consistent. You have to be okay with failures. You have to understand that effort and consistency will get you the results that you want. I would also like to say that a lot of times it's your environment as well that puts you in this fixed mindset, because as human beings, we tend to turn out like people that we spend a lot of time with. Like, I cannot put enough emphasis on this. When you surround yourself with people who have a growth mindset, it will enable you to also have a growth mindset. Like, if you hang out with people who you want to be like, if you hang out with people who have a growth mindset, people who are maybe more smarter than you or are more successful than you, then you can learn from them and then you can absorb that energy and it would help you be able to improve in a certain area of your life. You're really setting yourself up to either having a limited belief system or a limitless belief system. And it does have a lot to do with the types of people that you hang out with. So you have to be really mindful of the people that you talk to on a day-to-day basis. Are they actually bringing value to my life? Are they helping me get where I want to be, or are they having me stay in a box? If you're around people who are constantly telling you that you can't do something, it's not possible, you'll never get there, understand that they have a fixed mindset. That doesn't mean that you need to have a fixed mindset as well. You need to surround yourself with people who have a growth mindset. Your environment truly matters, and being around people who are not willing to change or grow or look at things from a different perspective can be detrimental to your life. Having a growth mindset can help you in so many ways. Think about this, because if you think from a position of, you know what, it's okay that I failed at this, I'm going to learn to be better, and you continue to bounce back from failure, what does that make you do? It helps you become more resilient, right? It builds that mental strength in you, and that type of belief system is so beneficial for you in order to succeed in whatever you are doing. And not only that, when you have a growth mindset, you tend to improve faster and reach higher levels because you're constantly learning, you're constantly growing, and then you're setting yourself up to higher achievement. When you have a growth mindset, you focus more on learning than being hard on yourself. This is something that I struggled with. If you listen to my other episodes, I've definitely talked about being a perfectionist, and I still struggle with this. I'm someone who is anxious driven. I want things to be a certain way, but that's doing nothing but harming my mental health. When I get into this mindset of it's okay, like, I don't have to do things a certain way. I don't have to be that hard on myself. This is just a learning opportunity. What does that do? It takes the pressure off yourself to be perfect, because again, no one is perfect, and it kind of sets you back to where you want to go. So when you have a growth mindset, you show yourself more grace and you understand that this was a learning opportunity, and next time you'll be better able to overcome a challenge. Also, when you have a growth mindset, you tend to again take feedback more constructively. You communicate better because you look at things from a different perspective, from a different lens. You can view conflicts as learning opportunities. So you tend to have better relationships as well, right? So you tend to have better relationship with your partner, your husband, your wife. You tend to have a better relationship with your friends, with your coworkers. When you are in this mindset of, I want to be better, I want to show up for myself, I don't want to let myself down, I want to show up as someone who respects themselves, I want to be able to handle conflict effectively, I want to be able to show up for somebody else and be able to communicate openly, you're naturally going to have better relationships around you. And like I said, when you have a growth mindset, you're constantly learning. You're constantly learning things about yourself. You're maybe constantly learning something about your industry. Whatever it may be, it tends to make you more curious and be able to adapt to change. You stay curious and you're willing to be in the state of learning and are constantly upskilling, I mean, this is great for personal growth. This is great for your career. This is great for your business. So remember, it all comes down to your mindset. I would like to end this episode with a quote, and I really like this quote. Becoming is better than being, which basically means that the process of you growing, the process of you learning, the process of you evolving, that journey in itself is more valuable, it's more fulfilling than getting the final results, right? And there's much more meaning to the journey than the outcome. When you're going through your journey, and sometimes you realize that you don't want the same outcome or the same results that you wanted a few months ago or a year ago. You learn more about yourself and you adjust accordingly. But there's so much value in challenging yourself, overcoming those challenges, the process of growing, the setbacks. You learn so much about yourself and you put yourself in a position where you're setting yourself up for success and not failure. You're setting yourself up for ultimate success. And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the topic and content, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might appreciate it. You can also follow me on my Instagram handle, soniasspacepodcast, for more updates and content. Until next time, stay curious and stay inspired. Bye bye.